to the little red super. Be standing. We're going to zoom in on. So, Ryan, if I move a little bit, this is going to be okay? Okay. I'll bring the mic. I'll bring this back to you in a second. So just to let everybody know, I'll repeat this again in 2 minutes, and since half of you are paying attention right now, this is where all the presentations will be made. All the public comments will be made from this microphone, and there'll be a 2-minute timer, and I'm going to go through this again, and just as soon as we go live, there'll be a 2-minute timer right here, so you'll be able to see it. It makes an absolutely obnoxious sound if you go over 2 minutes, so please try to keep everybody in the room that wants to make a comment can make a comment. So people are still coming in, and we're going to get started at 6 o'clock. So welcome, everyone. My name is Bill Shane. I'm the town manager here in Cumberland. I'm also the chairman of the Rail Use Advisory Committee, also known as RUAC. Very easy thing to say. There were 15 members appointed by the Commissioner of the Department of Transportation, and the Commissioner asked us to look at 3 things. And this is all about the rail corridor on the former St. Lawrence Atlantic line that goes from Portland to Auburn that the state bought several years ago. The 3 things he asked us were, do we maintain and preserve the existing line? Do we basically build a trail until rail? You cannot abandon a rail line by state law. You can make it a trail until rail comes. Or do we do a kind of a co-location, a rail and trail system? We have two staff members from DOT, Nate Howard and Nate Moulton. Nate Moulton is on the gentleman closest to me. They are our experts. And we also have Phil Goff and team from VHB. And Phil put most of the technical information together along with our DOT team. So tonight, very quickly, this is my brief introduction. Nate Howard will do some brief introductions and an overview of tonight. Phil Goff, our consultant, will go through the slides that he prepared just to kind of give an overview of online. And in less than 20 minutes, I promise, we will be getting right to the questions. This is your meeting. Basically, members of the RUAC are here to listen and to hear what you have to say tonight. We will be taking all that information on December 22nd. We'll be meeting back at the Cumberland Town Hall to kind of go through it all and then begin the process of what we were asked to do is make this presentation, make this recommendation to the commissioner. After which he can decide what to do with that at that piece. He can either take it, accept it, deny it, whatever he wants to do, that's his choice. But I'm sure, and I will just inform you, there'll be a lot more to this process as it moves forward. This is only the first step. If this process moves forward in any way, whether it be a preservation of trail and co-location of a rail and a trail together, I don't know. Whatever that recommendation comes out, the commissioner will make forward. And then at a later time, for instance, if this were in Cumberland and we had a better understanding of the costs, these are all preliminary costs right now and no one knows what their share of the rail will be or their share of a trail will be. No one knows those numbers just yet. When those numbers are available, as a town manager, my recommendation of the council, where this is more of a potentially a co-location or a recreational trail, we'd say let's ask our community. And we've often done that with large projects or any significant outlay of cash. And we don't know what that is. I would assume it would be hundreds of thousands by each community, but it's too soon to tell, and we'll know more as we go forward. But I think we'll have more public participation. I know this commission is a little bit frustrated because it's not really the way we kind of do our public process. It's more getting everybody involved around a table and figuring out what's the next step. This is a little different, but it's the first step of many steps in the process, and really appreciate your patience and hope tonight that you'll be able to give us your comments. Try to be brief and try to keep them under 2 minutes. We have a clock just to keep you on task, but that'll be my next job as the referee. So I'm going to turn this over now to Nate Howard, and Nate will lead us through some additional information.
Excellent. All right. Can everybody hear me? All right, my name is Nate Howard. I'm the rail director at Maine DOT. I work in the Office of Freight and Passenger Services. I just got a few quick slides, and actually a lot of the stuff I want to talk about, Bill kind of went over, so that will make it easy on me. Again, just want to talk about the Rail Use Advisory Council. I'll probably use the term RUAC, but that's what that means. So what is a Rail Use Advisory Council? What is a RUAC? So this process was established by the legislature in last year, 2021, for the review of non-rail uses on state-owned corridors. So what is the purpose of a RUAC? Well, the RUAC is to review and make recommendations on the likelihood, benefits, and cost of potential uses on the rail corridor, including rail use, trail use, and bikeways. So how does a RUAC get established? Maine DOT sets up the RUACs after we are petitioned by one or more municipalities along the corridor. Once that happens, the council has 9 months to submit a recommendation to the Maine DOT regarding the use of the corridor. The recommendation under statute may include majority and minority recommendations, and the process will include one public meeting, which we're doing here. So what is the corridor under review? Phil's from VHB is gonna show you a better map, but I'll just kind of tell you what it is. So it's 26.5 miles. We're starting in downtown Portland at Ocean Gateway, and the state-owned corridor ends at the New Gloucester-Auburn Town Line. So that's the corridor that the council is considering uses for. Along the corridor, we have one operator. That's the first mile on the Portland waterfront. That's the main narrow gauge railway. This line, freight service, concluded in 2015, so currently the remainder is inactive. It's state-owned, as I mentioned. It was purchased by Maine DOT under the Rail Preservation Act in 2007 and 2010. So under the Rail Preservation Act, Maine DOT has essentially two things it may do. First, it may lease the line, the railroad line, for an operator. If there isn't an operator, it may hold or manage the rail line for future rail use, which is exactly sort of what we do right now with the line. All right, so Bill already mentioned these, but these are sort of the options that are being considered by the council. The first option is the status quo, or the rail use option, which is to maintain, preserve the existing rail corridor. So that's what we do right now. That's what our maintenance crew does every day. You'll see if statewide, we have a maintenance crew of three and a half folks. We have some high rail equipment. You may see us out there occasionally on the lines, opening culverts, spraying the weeds, keeping crossings open. Sort of that's the status quo option. Obviously, if an operator comes on, a use comes along, we can lease that operator. So they have the interim trail into rail. So this is the option where they're removing of the rail and the ties and the ballast and converting to an interim trail. Third option, railwood trail. This is exactly what it means. So you building a trail offset from the rail, either 15 feet or 10.5 feet with a fence. So that's the second trail option. Other considerations for the council, if we're talking about a trail, then discussion should be had about, what type of trail is it, motorized versus non-motorized uses. In some of the other rail lines, ATVs and snowmobiles are always an issue, so that's an issue to be considered. And in the second one is maintenance responsibility. Maine DOT, we will maintain the rail, but we do not maintain trails. All right, so what are the next steps, real quick? So we kicked off in April, so we're coming to the end of our 9 months. Sort of the next kind of 4 steps in the process are finalize the corridor study. Phil's going to kind of present on that study. The draft is on our website. That'll happen by the end of the year. We have one additional council meeting scheduled in December on the 22nd. I'm assuming we'll schedule another one in January. That date is to be determined. Kind of the third step, the big step, is to develop a recommendation for the Maine DOT commissioner. So this is a recommendation from the council on a future use to Maine DOT. We expect that by the end of next month. And the last step, once a recommendation comes to the Maine DOT, to the commissioner, he may submit that recommendation, if applicable, for legislative approval. I say if applicable. If it's a rail use, obviously we have the authority to go forward with that, but if it's non-rail use, a trail or something else, that needs to go back for legislative approval. All right, so lastly, where can I find more information? We do have a website for the Rail Use Advisory Council. It's not, I wouldn't type that in. The easiest way to find it is just Google Maine DOT RUAC, and this will come up. This will be your first option. It will come up, and you'll see there's 3 councils up there. Just click on the left on the bottom, the Portland to Auburn, and all the information is there. And you can also use that website to contact us. If you submit a comment, it will come to me, and I provide all those comments to the council for consideration, and they'll make it into our final report. All right. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Phil. Yes.
Let's hope I can find things. I might need. Okay. I don't even see the mouse. Can't get the mouse. minor technical difficulties. We'll get through it. Yeah, thanks, Bill, for setting me up there, and thanks, Nate, for the intro. Again, my name is Phil Goff. I am the project manager on this effort for VHB, the consultant on the project, and I guess, well, hopefully that's going to work. You'll hear me well enough. So I want to provide, a bit more context for you. It's going to be like drinking from a fire hose in the next 10 minutes, so I apologize for that. It's a pretty dense report that you can find on the website, and I encourage you to look at it, and I'm going to try to, summarize it in 10 minutes or so. We'll see how we do. Whoops. Okay. Thought I hit the right arrow. Okay, is that yeah, all right. Scope of the study. So, Nate had brought this up before in terms of the scope of the study, the physical scope of what we're actually looking at within this project. The Berlin subdivision corridor starts at milepoint 0.0 at the Ocean Gateway in Portland. You see at the bottom right on the map near the Old Port area and runs up through East Deering and Falmouth, Yarmouth, North Yarmouth, up to New Gloucester, and the end of the state-owned line is at milepoint 26.5, which is just over the town line from New Gloucester into Auburn. You could see the context of the other rail lines. I think it's just important to understand that there are other rail lines in the area that are shown in orange that are owned by CSX. So there's the CSX freight main line that runs, roughly along the coast that has Amtrak service up to Brunswick, and then there is the branch that goes up. It remains the freight main line and runs up through Bangor. So again, these are just sort of important to understand the context of what the rail corridors are in the area. And as Nate and maybe Bill, so maybe it might be the third time for you seeing the potential uses that we're assessing here. But I'll get into a little more detail in terms of the cost estimates in particular, and then the economic. I won't get into environmental analysis that is within the report, but I'm not really going to cover it too much here in the presentation, but I'll get into the economic analysis and the cost estimates. So for those maybe who haven't been out to the corridor, I'm sure everyone here probably has seen the corridor and knows perhaps what it looks like in your immediate area, but just to get a sense from both ground level and from an aerial what the character is, obviously runs through a kind of diverse range of context, more urban areas in Portland and the East Deering neighborhood. There are some segments of the corridor you could see in Falmouth and others, Yarmouth and elsewhere, where the rail line is, quite close to private homes and other buildings and businesses that you see in a few images, and also, especially in New Gloucester and elsewhere, more rural areas adjacent to farmland, of course, adjacent to conservation lands, wetlands, and other environmentally constrained areas as well. So the order of magnitude cost estimates, that's sort of a major component of our scope of work, and I'll run through what the approximate costs are for each of the various options, starting with the first one. And the very first option that Nate had mentioned is just continuing the current maintenance activities, in essence leaving the corridor alone. That's sort of like the base option 0 almost, or the kind of base option. So there's no cost estimate there, but we looked at the cost estimate for freight rail service, and I'm trying to understand what would need to be done to the corridor to provide freight service along the full alignment. And that would be upgrades to the mainline track, or the state-owned portion of the track to a Class 2 conditions, which would allow 25 mile per hour freight service. That involves some partial tie and rail replacement. There's rehab of roadway crossings. There's some culvert work. What this doesn't include in this cost estimate is future siding construction costs. So you can see here there's kind of a low and a high. There's a range of different improvements that could be made to get up to the Class 2, but for all intents and purposes, we're looking at a cost 13.4 to 31 million for the option for freight rail service. For passenger rail service, you may have also mentioned, sorry, in the previous one, there is no freight, there is no opportunity by default almost for any freight service below mile point 1.7, which is at the other ends of the Back Cove Bridge. So the cost estimate here is just from the East Deering neighborhood next to the old B&B, B&M Baked Beans plant up to the end of the corridor at 26, mile point 26.5. But when we get into passenger rail service, we wanted to, and the trail, we wanted to look at what needed to be done to estimate the cost to actually bring both passenger service into downtown Portland or a trail into downtown Portland. So for the cost estimates for passenger rail service, which includes upgrades to the tracks to get up to what's called Class 3, which would allow 60 mile per hour passenger trains, allowing for double tracks where that's feasible, improved signal system, there'd be rehabs at all the public roadway crossings and also improvements at some of the private and farm crossings as well. And it does include a brand new bridge over the Back Cove in Portland to provide that access onto the peninsula, basically. What it doesn't include is the cost for passenger station construction. There are too many unknowns there, and then improvements that may be needed closer to Danville Junction. But you could see cost estimates here, mostly that segment 1, which is the lower portion in Portland. Most of that cost is for a new bridge, and then the other segment at 214 million to get the 274 total for that estimate. Moving on, order of magnitude cost estimates for the interim trail until rail, and I know Nate described it, but just so you see a little bit of visually what that looks like, at least in kind of a hypothetical scenario. You have the rail bed there, it's removed and replaced by a 10-foot wide path. Could be stone. We looked at cost estimates for both a natural surface with stone dust, gravel, and also a paved asphalt path as well. So looking at the cost estimates here, the assumptions we made here, it would be a new Back Cove Trail bridge to get the trail connection from the end of the Eastern Prom Trail and then further north up until the end of the corridor, and includes obviously the removing of the existing tracks and replacing that with the path surface, improvements at crosswalk locations, signage, potential flashing beacons at grade crossings, things like that. Cost here, total would be 47.5 to 55 million. And you could see that segment 1, that's really the cost of the bridge if it were to extend their interim rail trail, if it were to extend onto the peninsula, that would be the additional cost. Third one is the cost estimate work we did for the rail width trail. So as you can see from the graphic, what that does is, in essence, it leaves the rail corridor alone, leaves the tracks, the ties, and the ballast, and builds a trail, either a soft surface, natural surface path or an asphalt path adjacent with a 15-foot minimum offset. And that, as Nate had mentioned, there are options with, in real constrained situations, you could go down to 10.5 foot as an offset. As you see here in Ellsworth, it requires approval, of course, by Maine DOT, but that is possible. So just a few little glimpses of what that may look like. Again, like the trail until rail, the interim trail. This one, the trail construction, it assumes that the trail south of mile point 1.2, it's good to go. The Eastern Prom Trail includes the new bridge. This estimate includes the 15-foot offset from end to end, mark crosswalks, things like that. And, a big part of the cost here is the need for retaining walls in a number of places where there just simply isn't the space. Even though the graphic previously, showed sort of the nice clean condition, and there are places along the corridor where there's the rail line and there is space in the state-owned right-of-way to put in the trail, but retaining walls will be needed in some places. Also additional parallel bridges. Parallel to the rail tracks would be a secondary bridge carrying the trail as well. Some roadway overpasses would need to be rebuilt to widen it to allow both a rail and a trail to go through. But the rail corridor remains as is. So the cost estimate here, this doesn't assume any incorporation of either freight or passenger rail. This is just to build the trail, 15-foot offset, ideally from the rail corridor, 90 to 94 million, and again, about almost 20 million of both of those is just the bridge over the back cove. So that's sort of important distinction to make. We looked at cost estimates for ongoing annual maintenance of the corridor as well for both rail options and for the trail options. You can see that annual cost, ranges from 2.1 to 2.3 million for freight and passenger rail, and somewhere in the 91 up to 143 million for 143,000 annually for gravel path or paved path is somewhere roughly in the same order of magnitude, a little bit less. Want to give you, quick high-level summary of the economic analysis that our team, we had an economist as a subconsultant, RKG, working with us as well. And we, took the cost estimates that were included and kind of plugged that in to some models to understand what the benefits are of the various options that we're looking at for the corridor. So the benefits for freight rail, just high level, is certainly the temporary and permanent job creation, and that's that is the case for any option, no matter what we do. But the numbers are all different. So you can see in the table for the case of freight rail, 281 jobs for the construction, and then 18 permanent jobs for maintenance of the freight rail system. Potential additional investments that would include maintenance facilities and other things, business development, et cetera. And looking at, overall, and this is more of a higher level, we don't necessarily have a number to it, but it would, lead to the reduction in demand for heavy truck traffic carrying freight in the corridor as well. So that's not an insignificant benefit, although a little harder to put a number to. The benefits then for passenger rail, given the costs that we're looking at, the job creation, the total economic output you see in orange for both of these. But, reduction, again, from a qualitative point of view, reduction potentially in vehicle traffic and associated emissions along the corridor is something, it wasn't within the scope of the study to understand fully what the greenhouse gas reduction would be, but it's certainly in there as a high-level benefit. And then changes to the development mix and resulting land values, especially with the potential build-out of rail stations. And we did do, speaking of the rail stations, we looked at, the team looked at what the development impact of rail station locations would be. So these aren't specific sites. These aren't parcels. That doesn't include, what current and future zoning could be for individual parcels. It's just more about general locations that made the most sense along the alignment. One would be in Auburn, of course, at the end of the line, ideally connected to Danville Junction, so there's a place where people could at least access it. The Pineland East and North Pownell. At Yarmouth Junction, that's an important one for a station where it would be a transfer point for Amtrak service as well for the Downeaster to Portland and beyond to Boston. And then at the Ocean Gateway in downtown Portland area. So, I won't go into all the numbers here. You can look at it in the report, but, using the model, the in-plan economic analysis model, we're able to give at least a rough estimate of what some of the potential new development could be, mostly from like a housing point of view. So there are lines there related to new housing, how much could be potentially built around each of the station areas, the changes in household income, and then potential spending by individuals, and then even the tax revenue that comes in from the development and new people living in those communities. So that's all included in the report. Won't get into too much detail there. And of course, we looked at economic benefits and the changes along the corridor if there was with the trail options. And this is connected to the estimated usage of the trail. So based on analysis we did, trip estimates of either of the trail options would be 129 to 195,000 per year, and with an estimate that perhaps 25% would be from outside of the immediate area. And then looking at models from other case studies, $118 per day roughly spent on recreational equipment, transportation, lodging, food and drink by those users. And that does include snowmobile users, by the way, the 118. So that would be less if snowmobile use was not allowed in certain portions of the corridor. So that's important to a distinction. So the spending here would be $3.5 to $5.3 million of actual spending, money brought into the local economy along the corridor with any of the trail options. We also looked at the potential impact to residential property values. Currently, there's 3,382 single-family homes along the corridor within a half mile with a value of almost $350,000. And with the trail and given case studies and research from elsewhere, the anticipation of about 5 to 10% increased value upon resale of homes along the corridor. So that would have that impact on improved value of the land if one of the trail options were included. And the distinction isn't much different whether it's the rail with trail or the trail until rail. So just kind of to finish up here, I know there's a lot to take in, but just some of the high-level takeaways, at least from the economic analysis, is with the restoration of rail service, development opportunities at the passenger stations, if and when those are ever established, there is some significant development potential there, and that could bring the positive fiscal, economic benefits to the communities impacted along the entire corridor. Employment and economic activity that would come along either with freight or passenger rail along the corridors, and then potential reduction in auto traffic emissions, transportation costs. High level, we don't have necessarily data and numbers on those. With the interim trail or the rail with trail, high level takeaways here is a strong anticipated use, based on comparables from other places. Consumer spending that could bring in additional revenue to the communities along the way. And having a nearby facility for recreational activity really improves potential health outcomes in those communities. And the fiscal impact on neighboring property values is something that is perceived as a benefit and a high-level takeaway here too. So that's a quick summary. I hope it was quick enough. Bill's about to cut me off here, so I think I probably went a couple minutes over 10. I did. And I'm gonna hand it off to Bill and open it up for questions and comments. Thanks so much.
Okay, so now if you do have any questions, if you could come to the microphone at the far end, and I will get the timer queued up if I can. Questions and comments. and they'll be limited to 2 minutes. It's right there on that screen, right there. Can you see that, Paul?
There's nothing on the screen, but I see the screen.
Does it say, it does not say 2 minutes on it?
No.
Is it possible to get that connected, or is it not going to work for us today? And that's time. Through the screen. Is it not working?
We got to do the opposite.
Well, I plugged it into this one. So, right,
So I think we have to go back to settings maybe and do the opposite of where we did before. Settings, not system. Click on 2. What's the opposite?
didn't detect another display. Okay. All right, would I be able to put it on the big screen? Yeah, if I just went back to, so if I went back to,
Here.
all right, see if I can run it off the big screen.
Dude. I've been following.
It's in the same state as this, essentially. Same danger. As is this. I'm also wondering, when was the last time when I did a bike test with $150? And I've done thousands.
Well, double click on the one, so we're only doing it off this screen.
A day per day. I'm like, wow.
Doesn't detect another display, so.
I don't know. Considering I've done almost 30 days in a row, so I've never spent even a quarter of that per day. Because that would be broken.
All right, I went back to one.
Yeah, I mean, right. We can do that anyway.
Didn't detect either one of them. So, in somewhere in settings,
Like $15 a day.
this is,
This is kind of
I
stupid.
think so. Yeah, that's it.
Can you grab it and just slide it like you can't go your screen? No, but then you won't be able to control
State your opinion. Let's go home.
No, that. Okay. Okay.
I figure it's under settings, display, but then you can't get it
99%.
to click to the other screen.
Wow, I recognize that. I recognize that. Good, but I got my own timer if you need it. Gotta watch.
Okay, I guess I'll sit down there and for people to talk.
Yeah, I mean, you could just unplug this,
Yeah.
everything, and then just put it up next to it. You're gonna have to stand there.
There's an outlet over there.
Do you need it to be plugged in? Or
It can run off a battery, but I don't know if it'll last for more than an hour or
this
so.
will.
Okay. All right. Here we go.
I have a timer.
Okay, we're ready to get started. It's going to be more than the honor system. So, Paul, when you're ready, I'm going to start you right here.
Sure. Go ahead.
I think we're going to start you.
My name's Paul Weiss, and I'm a cyclist. Was a former president of the Portland Velo Club, and also a founding board member of Main Rail Transit Coalition and a board member of the Main Rail Group. Just briefly, I would highly encourage the use of the rail line for restoration of passenger rail service. With climate change hitting us, we really need to completely shift our transportation structure to what most of the rest of the world is doing, and that is electrified passenger rail. To do this, you need a service that can run around 21 trips a day from the state studies. And the only way to do that is on the state-owned line, the St. Lawrence Atlantic line, which was purchased for that. It was purchased by Governor Baldacci for restoration of rail service, passenger rail service. We've really, to take one of the most important critical lines in the entire state of Maine and turn it into a trail is really poor public policy. I am a bicyclist. I love cycling. I've ridden all over the world and ridden thousands of miles of bike trails. But I don't think this is a smart use or way to take our public infrastructure and turn it to something that's going to be used by a small segment of the population. To not have the two largest cities in the state of Maine connected by a public transit service that's clean, fast, and effective is really poor future for our state. And every time we take a rail line out of service, it's like you're cutting the roots of a tree. We're now down to the point where there's only 2 roots left in the state of Maine, and these are one of those few roots of the tree. If you keep turning the rail lines into trails, they never go back. Across the history of the United States and Rails to Trails coalitions, they never go back to rail. Just look at the facts of that. We're at a point where we really need to be moving away from car transportation. And your knee-jerk reaction is, sure, a bike trail sounds great, it's wonderful, it's fun and all that stuff, but it's really poor public policy. These lines are what's left of the state to transport hundreds of thousands of pounds of either freight or people on a very narrow pathway. And that was highly engineered over 100 years ago to do just that. It really can replace thousands and thousands of car and truck loads in that area. And we really need to be doing this quickly, fast, and effectively. And it just really would be extremely sad to see one of the most important, probably the most important rail line in the state being turned into a recreational path. And I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Could you just just let us know what town your name
Yeah.
and what town you're from?
Sure. My name is Colin Durant. I'm a resident of Yarmouth. I'm a dad. I'm a resident. I work there. And I just wanted to speak in strong support of the trail option, trail and till rail. I think both the study and the and comments I've seen really undercount the impact of a trail. A trail is, sure, it's a recreational resource, but it would be a transportation arterial, really. I mean, speaking for myself and my family and a lot of other residents that I've spoken to, people would use it to get to Portland. I would use it to get to Cumberland, use it to get to Falmouth. And so it becomes not just a recreational trail, but something that's an essential part of everyone's day. And it helps to reduce emissions, take cars off the road. And I know this is the case because I used to, prior to moving to Maine, we used to live near a trail that was really popular, again, not as a recreational trail, but as a way that people got around. And I think it's a really cost-effective use of the state's resources and the town's resources. And then, so I'm in strong support of a trail. And lastly, I just wanted to thank Cumberland for hosting us and thank Maine Dot and the members of the council for actually having this conversation, because I think it's really great that the state's considering. I think we can all agree that it's no good to just let these lines sort of just lay fallow if the state owns them. So hopefully they can be put to good use for Maine people. Thanks so much.
Just let us know where you're from and I'll start the clock.
Sure. This is Richard Rudolph. I'm a resident of Portland, Maine. I'm also the manager of the Rail Users Network, which is a national organization that supports light rail, regular rail. I'm also on the board of the Maine Rail Group, and we'll be faced with the same issue that you folks are facing tonight regarding the use of the lower road from Brunswick to Augusta and on to Waterville and Bangor. Two issues that I would like to address tonight. First of all, I can support passenger rail and a bicycle walking path if that's possible. That's not at all clear to me. I think the state needs to do a study to really determine whether that's possible. But on the other hand, rail use is really imperative. Other speakers have already talked about climate change, but when you think about it, the state's solution so far, DOT's solution, is encouraging people to buy electric cars. Well, good luck with that and building charging stations along the highways. Well, if you're young and if you're a senior like myself, you probably can't afford to buy a $50,000 car. Moreover, you probably don't even want to drive in a car. It was a hassle getting here tonight, and a bigger hassle because nobody put up a sign providing directions to this building. Myself and another person spent 15 minutes walking around different buildings to get here. So there's that issue. The other one is the question of social equity. People living in this community and in Falmouth, so forth, so on, are fairly well off. But there's people in Lewiston, Auburn, who are at the bottom of the barrel in terms of their economic ability. So I would urge the state to do a study that looks at both passenger rail and trail use. Thank you.
Don't breathe. Nobody exhale. Can you get your name and town?
Sure. My name is Tina West, and I live in Yarmouth. Tonight, I'd like to share the value and feasibility of having both trail and rail options, because the most logical corridor for expanded train service is different from the most logical corridor for a rail trail. First, a few facts. Maine has two distinct rail corridors between Portland and Lewiston Auburn, which I've outlined here, and I know you can't see all the nitty-gritty details of this map. The important lines to see are the green and the blue lines. The rail corridor outlined in blue is currently an active freight rail line, has additional capacity for passenger service, connects to the Portland Transportation Center, and provides opportunities for new train stops at Turnpike Exit 53 in West Falmouth and Pineland, as well as Lewiston, Auburn, and destinations north. The rail corridor outlined in green is not being used by trains today and would cost, according to the report that was referenced earlier in the evening, would cost between $13.4 and $31 million to provide the required maintenance for an active rail use. So since the blue corridor is currently being used to transport freight between Portland and Auburn and has the capacity to support future passenger service, please consider using the unused green rail corridor for a trail, for all the good reasons that I'm sure will be presented by other folks tonight, and because it supports Maine's active transportation vision. In closing, perfect. Thank you.
Just tell us your name and who you're from.
Good evening. My name is Will Teamy, and I've lived here in Cumberland for just over 10 years. Before moving to Cumberland, I lived most of my childhood up in Bodenham and have many fond memories walking the inactive rail line that runs through that town. So I certainly get the appeal of walking along those wide, flat rights-of-way. Much of the rising cost of living facing our area is due to housing scarcity. According to an article earlier this year, Portland was short by at least 8,000 units of housing in 2019 and up from 2,300 units in 2012. One obvious result of this is expansion. Portland area workers spread out in search of less expensive housing markets. In doing so, workers who would have been able to bike or walk around the city are faced with the incredible expenses of car ownership. Maine's aging population also faces their own serious set of issues with our car ownership-centric transportation model. Traffic is also getting downright dangerous around here. During rush hour, the Falmouth off-ramp on 295 often backs up all the way onto the right lane of the interstate, which is incredibly unsafe. The roads are being widened and improvements are being installed, but studies have shown that this nets diminishing returns. A rail connection between Portland and Lewiston, Auburn could help to mitigate this housing shortage. Unfortunately, if we tear out our existing infrastructure, such a project becomes much harder. Maine has a deep and interesting history of rail transit, from the electric railways of the 1800s that served an incredible swath of Maine to the passenger rail that connected Portland to Lewiston, Auburn, and much of the country. Despite the trolleys and passenger rail of years past having mostly disappeared from common knowledge, we still have the remnants of our once strong rail system at our disposal. While improvement projects are not guaranteed to occur, they are dramatically less likely to proceed if this section of track is demolished. We can have a rail trail without bulldozing the very infrastructure that could help us alleviate our housing woes and traffic congestion while fighting climate change. We could have rail and a trail. Thank you.
Very good.
I can stand up. Yeah. I'm getting good at whipping this thing around. Good evening. My name is Shirley Story King, and you've heard from me before, so I'm not going to repeat my concerns tonight, other than the major concern I have is that none of the abutters along this corridor have been involved in this process. There are, on the slides it said there were roughly, there were over 300 units in Cumberland. There are actually only 42 landowning abutters on this stretch of track through the town of Cumberland. What I have tonight, for whatever my time will allow, is a letter from one of my neighbors, Joe Comiska. My name is Jo Comiska, and I'm a resident of Cumberland and an abutter to the proposed trail. I state my opposition to this proposal as both a supporter of rail and economic development and as an abutter to the trail. Whether a trail or trail rail is considered, motorized vehicles must not be allowed. The highest and best use of the corridor is for rail travel. Use for non-rail activities is not in the public's interest. The town of Cumberland would receive no economic benefit from this trail as there are no public access points to the area. The only impact to Cumberland residents would be negative and a hardship to abutters. Current parking for Cumberland's existing trails have been targeted by vandals, and auto break-ins are frequently being reported. The fact that parking areas are needed for walking, biking trails is a bit odd to begin with. I do not believe that this proposed trail would be used for commuting. The plan itself identifies the peak use would be in October and May. It would not meet the infrastructure needs to be a permanent solution for commuters. A rail corridor is really the only option. Rail can run 12 months per year, and parking areas for rail stations are very secure. Rail will bring economic benefit. It would be poor public policy and a waste of current and future public funds to pay for a trail instead of supporting an existing rail. And I'll have to submit the remaining 2.5 pages online. Thank you.
So just let us know where you're from, your name and where you're from.
Good evening. My name is Brendan Weston. I'm from New Gloucester, and just want to say thank you for having this event. I'm an entrepreneur, and I'm the owner of DuraBike, and I'm developing Class 1 and Class 2 pedal assist e-bikes that have a range of 70 to over 100 miles per bike, and I think that having a rail and a trail option would be a good idea. My question for tonight is, why wouldn't we have additional freight and passenger service on the already established rail line? It seems a bit like having two Interstate 95s going up the same direction.
Microphone. You want to answer? Go ahead. Can you answer in the mic?
Are you talking about currently on this line, why there's no freight or passenger service?
No, why would we be improving the light rail system for additional freight and passenger instead of just moving that over to the already established line that's going up north and south?
Yeah, that's been one of the discussion points among advocates, in particular trail advocates, that there is that other line. So, I mean, I can't answer that per se. Again, the rail line used to have freight back to the B&M days and others, and right now it doesn't have any freight because there is no demand. I mean, freight service is driven by demand. And on the, give him an extra few minutes here because I'm taking his time. On passenger, same thing we've done. If you've kind of followed, the state is in the midst of an economic evaluation on two different alignments to go to Lewiston, Auburn from, and this line was looked at in previous studies. So that's kind of an ongoing look. Again, we're responding to the petition to look at this corridor and do this review. So it's not a matter of economics driving this or anything in particular. It's more of the law was passed, we've had a petition, so we're going through the process.
Do you know the capacity of the established freight line?
On the CSX line, is that what you do?
Yes.
I mean,
Or how much of that is being used? Is it 50% usage, or is it?
that's a privately owned line, so it would be negotiations with, you have places where there might be 100 trains a day, right? And then there are other places where, 10 is considered a lot. But you can always add capacity by adding sidings, doing different things and things of that nature. But it's more of a negotiation with that private rail owner. So for me to say there's plenty of capacity, that would be a discussion with them. There appears to be capacity on that line because I think there's about 6 trains a day.
Thank you. And as I mentioned, I am an entrepreneur, so check out durabike.us.
I'm Peter Lindsay. I live in North Yarmouth, have for about 40 plus years. I'm in favor of the trail until rail. My understanding, again, like the question you just had, is that the other line is available. And I'm excited for, I think, all the towns, if we can help with connectivity between some of the town parks and this kind of a trail. So I don't know if that's been looked at that much, but that's one thing I think that would be benefit for the different towns, especially in North Yarmouth anyway. So I'll keep it short and let other people speak. Thank you.
Bill, can I make a quick comment?
Quick.
Just follow up on his comment. What I said was that, on that line, there's existing rail service. There's a fairly low amount of current freight trains on it, and it appears that there might be capacity there, but it's up to them. I don't want to be quoted as saying there is capacity there, it's available for use. We do not own that line.
I just want to be careful which rail line we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's the
CSX
line, which is the active rail.
Yes.
In Cumberland and North Yarmouth and everywhere. Okay.
I don't represent the railroad.
What time?
Hi, my name is Scott Douglas. I live in North Yarmouth, and I'm strongly in support of a non-motorized recreational trail as a matter of public health to provide attractive opportunities for more people to be more active, and as a matter of public safety for walkers, runners, cyclists, to have a place to go and exercise without having to worry about getting hit by a car. Thanks.
Your name and town you're from.
My name's Dan Austri. I'm from the town of Yarmouth. I wanted to share a report that we did in 2014 of connectivity for bicycles and pedestrians in the greater, the north of Portland region. This was a PACS and DOT funded study. There was a great deal of public participation in this, and every town came out with a desire for greater connectivity, for improving the East Coast Greenway, which right now runs on highways, many of them dangerous. We would like to get that off. And Yarmouth has been talking about using the rail through town as a connectivity vehicle since 2009, when I became chair of the Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee. But I don't know that this is in the record, so I just want to give it to Bill to share. I'm not opposed to rail. I just spent 2 weeks in Europe and traveled exclusively by rail and bus. It's expensive, but it was great. I think that the one concern I have with using this rail for that purpose is that it doesn't connect with the rail hub in Portland. And I'm not convinced that there will be enough train service getting to Portland to connect with the trains that are going down to Boston. And when I was in Europe, I saw thousands of bicycles in the middle of cities of people who came in and used them to work. My exchange student who lives there rides his bike to work almost all the time. So I think that it is disingenuous to say that this would not be used for commuters. I think that that's a big mistake. It's an incredible asset. I'm also responsible for the West Side Trail in Yarmouth. It's a 12-mile trail network that crosses 20 roads. Every 50% of the population in Yarmouth can connect within 20 minutes. And I think that it's really important to understand every road in every town can be connected to this, and it's a tremendous asset. It doesn't always require parking. So I would just ask that you seriously consider trail until rail and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Mark Focazato. I reside in Brunswick, and I just want to say I strongly support the use of this corridor as rail to trail. Thanks.
Good evening. My name is Travis Pryor, resident of Freeport. I've been biking as a, I guess, way of life or trying to commute for about 45 years. including this evening. I try and bike year-round from Freeport to Portland. I'm here to tell you that I would use it as a commuting route. I'm fairly comfortable being on those busy roads, but I know a lot of folks that I talk to are not, and they would prefer an option to have a safe route off-road. I also ride the Downeaster as much as I can, and would support both passenger rail and trail moving forward. I've sat where you guys are tonight working on the Merry Meeting Trail study between Topsom and Gardner, and appreciate all the great work that you're doing. And I would encourage you to consider a 12-foot wide multi-use trail versus 10 feet as kind of the desired or preferred maximum, I mean, especially if you're going to consider snowmobiles or maybe potentially horses in some of the rural areas. It's a little bit more compatible use, I think, if you can get 12 feet of width where you can. And thank you.
Good evening. My name's Dan Bannon. I'm a resident of the town of Cumberland. I just want to speak in support of a trail option, whether that's trail until rail, trail with rail. I just think that this is a tremendous opportunity for our communities for both recreation and transportation. As an avid runner and cyclist myself, I would certainly use this for recreation, but also I work in downtown Portland. I occasionally commute by bike, but I don't really like to because riding on Route 9 is pretty dangerous and scary at times. I would definitely use this to commute to downtown Portland. So I'm one for using it as a commuter path. So thank you.
I'm ready, yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Grace Eddy. I'm a resident of Portland. I'm here tonight to read the written testimony of Patricia Washburn, who is a wheelchair user and unable to make the meeting in person. Patricia writes, as a wheelchair user in Maine, my only transit options are Portland Metro, Amtrak, or buying a wheelchair-accessible vehicle, which is expensive and wasteful. I cannot, for example, get from my home in Portland to the Greely High School in Cumberland to deliver this testimony in person. I write today in support of retaining rail tracks on state-owned lines that have fallen out of use. Why? Rail transit is due to make a comeback in Maine for transportation both of goods and passengers. Today's technology makes rail transportation sustainable and effective in helping combat climate change. On a more personal level, I am a wheelchair user and can access rail transportation, whereas trails and wilderness corridors are not useful even as recreational space for me and some other people with disabilities. If the needs of people with disabilities are not enough to move you, and they should be, consider also the many others whom better interstate rail transit would be beneficial. People who need to access healthcare facilities in Portland, do business in Lewiston, Auburn, or participate in civic life in Augusta. By making train travel possible for more Mainers, we can cut pollution and travel costs, encourage community entrepreneurship, and use this state-owned land to benefit the people of Maine. I encourage you to invest in improving and rebuilding Maine's rail infrastructure to allow this important asset to benefit all Mainers, not just the ones with able bodies. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Grayson Lookner. I'm a state representative in Portland, and I'm here today to testify in opposition to any plan to remove rails from the state-owned rail line. I think chief among our, the biggest benefit to restoring rail service would be cars off the road, and I think that's something that unites proponents of bicycle and pedestrian safety as well as rail users, rail advocates. Cars off the road means safer roads, safer streets, safer communities, more bikeable and walkable communities. So I think we should all be on board with that. Secondly, I think the plan to use the CSX line is impractical. Anyone who's ever ridden Amtrak along freight-owned lines between Cleveland and Boston knows how impractical it is because you have to work around the freight schedule, which means that there are frequent delays, frequent cancellations, and that makes it likely that people who would use that line would find it impractical and eventually figure out it's better to drive or just not go to Portland at all. You know, from climate to housing to equity for people with disabilities and low income, I don't see a detraction from creating rails with trail. If there were a trail, I'm an avid bicyclist, I'm an avid hiker, I'd certainly utilize it, but I don't want to see a state-owned rail that has the potential to do so much good be removed. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Barney McClellan. I'm a resident of Yarmouth. In the 14 years I've had experience with it, 295's traffic has become overwhelming. It gets worse every day. I'm a strong advocate of light rail, and I think a rail corridor through Yarmouth would be wonderful. I would use it. I have traveled extensively in Europe. I've used their interurban system. It's great. And I think it's quite affordable, but maybe also, yeah, I would be open to having a trail next to it. That would be fine. But I do not think we should tear up the rails. If you do, they'll never come back.
Actually, before I start my comments, I want to thank everyone for participating today and getting active in the community. My name is Cole, I'm from Saco, but I love to see like the town of Cumberland and everyone around it that's affected by this issue involved. So just a big thank you for that. I am actually here on behalf of Maine Climate Action Now. It's a coalition of environmental organizations across the state, and I'm here to recommend to maintain the existing rail corridor. I did have a 3-minute speech, which goes well beyond the 2-minute limit. So I'm going to do this offhand here. First off, 54% of Maine's emissions are from the transportation sector. And it also coincides with 76% of our transportation through cars. This is not a coincidence. I believe that we need to strengthen our public transportation system in order to reduce our emissions. And improving existing rail corridors that are owned by the state is a really viable option. I've been studying public transportation for the past couple of years, and I see that an intercity passenger rail service is quite viable. It reduces emissions per capita by 63%. So it's pretty cost effective for the average taxpayer and is able to reduce our emissions effectively. I'm also an advocate for trails. I've been a hiker since I was 4 years old, and I think that having a trail with a rail is perfectly fine. But I think maintaining this rail corridor is chief among all, especially during a time when Maine is getting so much federal funding for projects like this. We could really invest into our communities and make this the time where we could have more active transportation and more public transportation. But I'll keep my comments brief, and I thank you for your time.
Good evening. My name's Deborah Koyman, and I'm a resident of Falmouth. I live near that Veranda Street overpass that you put a picture of before. And I'm really here to speak in support of a trail option, the trail option. I'm not as knowledgeable about rail options and what the pluses and minuses of the different corridors are as some of the previous speakers. And I am an environmentalist, and I am concerned about climate change, so rail with trail, if that's feasible, is good. I have ridden the East Coast Greenway from Calais to Key West, and I have seen a variety of trail options, and I've seen a variety of really bad bike shoulder, no infrastructure for bicyclists in other states and in parts of Maine. And it is scary for people who are not experienced road cyclists to get on a bike and venture out onto Route 1 or Route 9 or Outer Congress Street for that matter. And this is an option to make a very central trail available for new bikers, people who don't want to be on the street. So I just would like to make that case, and if it can be done with rail, that would be fine too, and I would certainly use it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dan Emery. I live in North Yarmouth. I have an office in Yarmouth. I'm in a butter in both locations. I have been involved in this process. For someone who said no butters have been involved. I strongly support the rail trail. I won't bore you by repeating the benefits of it. I'm also a cyclist who's ridden around this area for 37 years. Just a couple of brief comments. What was said about the lack of demand rings true to me. I haven't studied the issue, but I've lived 70 yards from that railroad for 37 years. There used to be multiple trains per day that used to shake my house. There hasn't been a train car on that road for years on that track. The last one was the Silver Bullet up to Sunday River. That didn't even last very long. So I'm not sure what the demand is, but I am sure what the benefits of a bike trail are. And secondly, as to the option of adjacent trail and rail, I just don't see that. I invite somebody to come out to my house and look at my crossing and look at that trail, that track. It's very narrow right-of-way. It slopes at the sides. You'd have to truck in a bunch of fill and I think probably buy property to do that. So I have questions about that option. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Elizabeth Ehrenfeld, and I live in Falmouth, and I want to echo the thanks to having brought all of you together today to listen to our comments. I'm a big supporter of developing bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure, and I see this as an important part. I was on the board of Portland Trails. I was on the Falmouth Trails Advisory Committee. I was working with the MDOT 20 years ago, talking about doing the other railroad bridge going from Portland to Falmouth and the potential, well, perhaps Falmouth too, but putting a bicycle pedestrian infrastructure in there too. And so I'm really excited about bringing this all the way into Portland. I'd also say that I grew up in Lower Manhattan. I used to take the subway to Grandma's house every Friday night, so I'm very used to light rail. I lived in Switzerland for 5 years before I came here, and it's great to have that facility. But I'd also have you look at both Boston and New York City, which are really increasing their bicycle infrastructure right now. Over the past 10 to 20 years, there are a lot more bike lanes. People are really using bikes to get around a lot more in the Northeast. And it's a really great opportunity that we're talking about here to increase the bicycle infrastructure. I've also been bicycling from Michigan to Maine, and I was really surprised in all the rail trails they have in Michigan, you know, the land of the cars, and they're building out all this bicycle infrastructure. And I really think that in Maine, people are really here, a lot of people are here for the outdoors, and giving more bicycle pedestrian infrastructure is a really great idea. So thank you very much, and I hope we can do something with this facility.
Hi, my name is Rob Hale. I live in North Yarmouth. I live directly across the street from this rail corridor in question. I've lived there for 10 years. I've seen a locomotive on their track maybe twice. It's been more than 8 years since I've seen a locomotive there. Currently, this rail corridor is used by dog walkers, skiers, bicyclists, walkers, and hikers. There's access to river crossings. I think that the state should formalize the current use of this rail corridor, so I strongly support the trail into rail option. I think there's another option for commuting from Auburn to Portland, and that's the existing CSX trail. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Art Bell. I'm the resident of Yarmouth, and I have the honor of representing Yarmouth in the legislature. My wife and I are both very enthusiastic rail trail users. All over the country, we've ridden our bikes on trails. But I want to argue tonight that this is, putting on my legislator hat, that this is a public policy issue, a very simple one. We have an asset here, a very valuable asset in the corridor, and it's not being used. It's sitting fallow, and it needs to get used. And I think putting it to use as a trail, it makes the most sense, especially since there's an alternative. There's no downside risk here. There's an alternative track that we've been talking about this evening for freight or for rail. And there's also the opportunity with the rail banking program to have this, if we were to convert it to a trail, that it could always, the state would own it and could always take it back at any point in the future. So from an economic standpoint, it just makes all the sense in the world to me that we would take advantage of this from a public policy perspective and convert it into a trail for the time being. And then just the advantages of recreational opportunity, the public health opportunity. There's just, it's a wonderful public policy opportunity, and I think we should take advantage of that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alec Yeagerman. I live in Portland. I spent many years as a planner in Portland and 5 or 6 years as a planner in Yarmouth. I just want to say that I'm also on the board of Portland Trails, but I'm not currently speaking as a board rep. I'm just speaking as an individual. I am in favor of the rail until trail option, or permanent trail, trail until rail option, so I got that backwards. And I think this is an important regional corridor, not only for recreational use, but also for commuting. I've biked to work from Portland to Yarmouth many times. Not all the time, though, because it's kind of a difficult bike, when you take Route 88 or the Yarmouth or the Cumberland route, Middle Road. But this corridor would make that a much better and easier route. There's a study, I think, from Germany that noted that a 12-mile commute would convert drivers to bikers, that is a reasonable distance to get a commute, to convert people to commuting by bike. Obviously that's Europe and this is America, so maybe not quite the same, but something that could increase over time. I think if this was done, it would be at least 3 seasons for most of us. I'm a fair weather cyclist at best, year-round for some avid bikers. But we can't have both. I think the CSX line makes a lot of sense for passengers and freight, and I think this makes a lot of sense for a trail, so I would encourage this route to be reserved for a trail purposes. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Gary DeLisio. My wife Shelley and I have lived in North Yarmouth for about 20 years. Although we're not directly abutters, we do live across the street from public access at Chandler Brook, public access to this potential trail. We've also, I've been on the planning board in North Yarmouth, and my wife was on the Parks and Recreation Committee, so we know that establishing green space and connectivity and recreational activities is a very important mission to the town of North Yarmouth specifically. We both feel very strongly that having some sort of a trail option, whether it's a trail until rail or a trail only option, would be wonderful for the town and for the area. It's not clear to me from the discussion whether there's clearly a need at this point in time for either additional freight or passenger rail, whether we're quite ready for that. But if there's a possibility of retaining that option and leaving the rail behind and still establishing a trail that can be used for commuting for some and recreation, I think we both think that would be excellent. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Brian Seitz from North Yarmouth. I just wanted to come up and speak in favor of some sort of rail system through this corridor. I live on North Road, and when I ride my bike between North Yarmouth and Yarmouth, I cross the rail line 3 times. I have a personal vendetta against the rail line at this point. It did jump up and bite us one day on our tandem, and my wife shattered her collarbone. So I'd rather ride on the trail than across it, or on the rail line and then cross it at this point. But I also sit on the North Yarmouth Select Board. And I hear a lot of things. Some of the folks got up here and said, one of our big priorities is connectivity. We have a lot of great assets, parks, access to waterways, and where this trail would go through would give more public access to that. And I think that's ultimately a good thing for the public good. And I'm a huge proponent of that. So I just wanted to get up and speak in favor of it tonight. And I don't envy the position that you guys are in, like having 3 options, because the only bad one is the one you're going to land on in the end. So best of luck to you. Thanks.
Good? Okay, hi. My name is Sylvia Casano. I'm speaking on behalf of the Maine Trails Coalition, or MTC. MTC is a statewide, all-volunteer organization founded in 2019 to champion the establishment, use, and stewardship of trails in Maine. So we have support all over the state and are part of a growing movement that is aimed at helping make Maine a leader in active transportation. The MTC supports the Trail Until Rail option use proposed for this corridor. This Portland to Auburn corridor is part of an integral component of our Maine active transportation plan. This vision is a joint vision of 8 organizations concerned with active transportation in Maine. It would connect all of Maine's 25 largest municipalities and over 2/3 of the population. It's one piece of the puzzle to providing equitable transportation options for communities and underserved populations. I have handouts available with me tonight about this active transportation arterials vision if you would like to learn more. And again, we are in support of the Trail Until Rail option. Thank you.
My name is Bruce Sleeper, and since 1989, I've been volunteer legal counsel to Train Riders Northeast. Train Riders is a citizens group which got the ball rolling on getting the Downeaster back into Maine, and we still support that service as well as maybe extension and growth of that service. I'd like to point out first that the Maine Rail Preservation Act says that the legislature finds that safe, efficient, and reliable rail service is essential to the economy of the state, the economic livelihood of industries located in the state, conservation, protection of the environment, and the quality of life of the citizens of the state. In addition, I'd like to point out that the bond issue that went before the people to raise the money for the state acquisition of this line specifically said that this line was going to be purchased for rail purposes. I'm not saying that trails are bad. I am saying that trails with rails can be successful so long as there's adequate distance between the rail line and the trail, and so long as you don't have numerous crossings of the trail across the rail line. I am saying that trails until rail is a misnomer. Throughout the United States, we've had several thousand miles of rail which has been abandoned with rail banking so that it could be used later could be put back into service later on, even if there is a trail now being used. Of those thousands of miles, probably less than 100 has ever been reconverted to freight use. Now, one reason for that is most of those abandoned lines, there was no reason to reconvert it to rail use. But there are 2 other reasons. Sorry, you'll have to read up. Thanks.
Hi, Phil.
All right. My name is Martha Leggett. I live in North Yarmouth, and I'm going to start out by saying that I'm a strong supporter of trail until rail. I'd also like to quickly touch on the potential economic benefits of the trail. While there have been many existing studies regarding the economic impact of recreational trails, the most salient to me, due to its proximity to the trail we're discussing, is the Eastern Trail's economic impact analysis. As many of you know, the Eastern Trail goes from the state border in Kittery and ends in South Portland, with a portion of the trail located in Scarborough. According to an economic impact statement completed in November 2021 on the effect of the Eastern Trail, there was an annual economic benefit to the state of Maine of over $44 million. To break this down, there were an estimated 243,000 trail users annually, and each user, as was indicated earlier, spent an average of $118 per day. The estimated sales benefit in the region and the state of Maine was the estimated sales benefits in the region and state of Maine was over 32 million. Most sales came from overnight lodging, food and drink, and retail items. The trail also supported a total of 364 jobs, which computed to over 12 million in income generation. The combined benefit of tax revenue from property and sales taxes in the region and across the state was over $1 million. Additionally, the study showed that the presence of the Eastern Trail attracted residential developments and businesses to the area and has made the region a more desirable place to live and work. These aren't small numbers, especially considering the health, environmental, and community advantages that accompany these economic benefits. Thank you.
The clock wanted to get its turn. Name and tell.
I'm Emma Bond, and I live in Portland. I support the trail use, and I live in East Deering specifically, and I really want to see something happen with this land. It's abandoned, it's behind my house, and nothing's happening on it right now, except for sometimes people, including me, walking my dog. Passenger rail is great. It's also extremely costly, and I've not seen numbers suggesting that there's going to be a federal match or federal monetary support for even one passenger rail line from Portland to Lewiston, much less two. We have the CSX line. That's the appropriate place to have passenger rail. And focusing specifically on the Portland to Yarmouth section of the rail, there's been ongoing rail feasibility studies, and the Portland to Yarmouth section is no longer under consideration in those studies. Studies are ongoing for other sections, but not Portland to Yarmouth, and that's because you have the North Station, South Station problem. People don't necessarily want to end up stranded in Portland. They maybe want to get to Boston. That's the problem with the Ocean Gateway. So we should use this land for something. It's state-owned land. It should not just be left being completely unused. It should be used for a trail. And I'd also like to address the disabilities issue. People with disabilities have all kinds of different needs and desires to get outside. Last winter, I was using a wheelchair. I still am a person who has a disability. I was really enjoyed when I was using a wheelchair, having people give me a ride and go to the Eastern Trail. That was an amazing benefit, that I could actually use that space without having to try to navigate over routes. And this would be a space that bikes can use it, wheelchairs can use it, people of all abilities, ages can use it safely. They can get outside and not worry about getting hit by a car. So for those reasons, I would really advocate that you support the interim trail use. Thank you.
Yep. All right, I'm Jacob Cholak. I live in Portland in the East Deering neighborhood. I just want to give a couple quick local things. First of all, there's wonderful sub-trails coming off of those tracks all through East Deering. One of them goes straight to the elementary school. I'm not saying kids ever go back there. I'm just saying it would be possible and it would get kids safely to the school. I'm a true Mainer, I promise, but I've been here for about, let's say, 5 or 6 years, and I moved here from Washington, D.C. The roads around here are scary. Biking is terrifying here. I don't know if y'all have noticed this. There's not much of a shoulder. There's very few trails that you can actually use. In D.C., I had really good train access. The metro I could take all the way to work. It was $5 each way, and as a teacher, that adds up pretty quick. So I went to a thrift store and bought a very inexpensive bicycle, and they had the Washington Old Dominion Trail there, which took me straight from D.C. all the way the 20 miles to my place of work in Northern Virginia. That was significantly cheaper. So biking is actually an extremely economical option for people that can't necessarily afford trains. In cities that do have trains and bus systems, the bus is what the less affluent people tend to take. Trains always end up being very expensive because of those millions of dollars you saw up there. And last of all, it would just be such a tremendous use of this unused space for the people of Portland, for the people of East Deering, and for the people like me who would love to resume their bike commute, which would be much easier if the cars weren't, right here. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Good evening. My name is Mark Barnett. I'm a resident of Auburn. I'm also a business owner and a daily commuter to Portland. And there are a lot of intersecting issues here. I think mostly what I would like to provide is my perspective on someone who's kind of a perfect use case for commuter rail between the state's largest two metropolitan areas. I drive 70 miles plus a day as part of my commute. That's a lot of fuel burned. I am certainly not able to afford an electric vehicle. I don't think those are going to be terribly affordable anytime soon. And so I look at this as why would we, if we have the possibility, why would we pit these two uses in opposition to one another rather than considering an option that preserves both? I know there's a lot of complexity to it, and I don't intend to insert myself into the local uses. I think those are incredibly important. And I do, as also a bicyclist and a naturalist, I think that access to an interconnected and safe transit system for bicycles and pedestrians is incredibly important. So I would just speak against cutting off the option of using public transit or the use of this for public transit in the future, because as many people have alluded to, as all of us know, there are housing affordability issues in the state. We have a massive pollution issue with our vehicle transportation, and there's only really one option that we have to make the biggest progress possible for our climate and related goals, and that is light rail. Now, I understand there are other options perhaps that could be considered, and so I'm not saying we should choose one versus the other, but removing the possibility of that use, which would take thousands of cars off the road, hundreds of hours of people sitting in a car driving, not being able to do anything productive, which you could on light rail. I just want that and hope that would be considered in comparing these uses. So thanks so much.
Patty Barber, there are different opinions among many here tonight. The only option that pulls everyone together is rail with trail. It can be done, rail with trail, $90 million, the middle of the cost estimates. It allows trail people to get their trails and train people to get their trains. The major argument trail people have against rail with trail is time. They feel by removing the tracks, they could bring a trail along the underutilized asset to people sooner. This is actually not the case. When tracks are to be removed, it must go to the Joint Transportation Committee in the Maine legislature for a vote in the Maine House, then the Maine Senate, then the governor, finally federally to the FRA. As anyone who's watched the legislative process knows, politics can be fickle. So choosing to pull up the tracks, especially if there's opposition to that decision, can delay the entire process greatly. Now, if no tracks are to be removed, such as with rail with trail, no further legislative process is needed. It goes directly to the planning stages. The absolute best use, the original reason the state of Maine preserved this line, is as a full transportation corridor with equitable access to all taxpayers. those who have to commute to work, to doctors, to shop, who don't own a car or have a driver's license, who are elderly or toting young children. These people also need transport options, and keeping the tracks will allow this while others can bike or walk to their destinations. And we all know the huge health and environmental benefits of taking thousands of cars off the roads. With newer transit technology, commuter rail is an instrumental piece of our green climate future. We can move this forward for all of us. Keeping the tracks is the key to getting our trails as well as our trains sooner. Please vote for Rail with Trail.
Hi. I believe that the existing infrastructure from town to town, county to county, should stay as rail. It is much more effective and much more green to run a railroad and railroad cars versus tractor trailers on main roads. The economic benefit to each town along the way of a running train would far outweigh any benefits of a trail. If there is a trail, landowners along the trail will see increased trespassing and theft due to easy access. So please keep the tracks, because once they are removed, they will never come back.
My name is Zach Mueller. I'm a resident of Portland. Yeah, thanks. I just moved here from New York City about a month ago, and I was a daily bike commuter in New York City, as well as a frequent rider of the subway, Metro North, New Jersey Transit, etc. I want to stress what the woman in the magenta sweater said about the bike culture in NYC. It's like never been a better time to be a biker in New York City, and I'm like a first round account of that. Especially with this explosion of city bike and e-city bike, you know, people who had never biked before are finally like biking because it's so easily accessible. Getting here a month ago, I felt completely unwelcome as a cyclist around Portland. In my head, it's called car supremacy. You know, it's just there. So given the opportunity we have here, I'm fully in support of any options that will offer that shrinking of that car supremacy. I'm in support of trail into rail. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Tingle, and I'm from East Deering in Portland. And I've been living next to the rail there for 20 years and walking on it and skiing on it and just enjoying it. And I would love it to turn into a trail. And I don't care which kind of trail. I just really want a trail. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ann Gass, and I live in Gray. I'm a former council member and current member of the Open Space Committee, and was really involved in writing for Gray's first ever open space plan. And obviously, this line would not go through Gray, but we do have a vision through our open space plan of building more trail connectivities within Gray and also connecting to other trails in adjacent towns. And I really think that, I'm a big supporter. I'm not here to speak on behalf of the town or the Open Space Committee, but just from my own perspective and knowing people in Gray, I think there would be a tremendous amount of support for this, for some sort of rail option. To me, it seems incredibly inefficient to maintain two different rail lines. I just don't see that there's the population in the area to support two rail lines. Getting the transportation both for commercial and for passenger rail on one line makes most sense to me economically. I understand that's not a decision the state can make unilaterally, but I would support some kind of trail option on this rail line. I think we need it. It's going to be great for the region health-wise and economically as well. Thanks.
I'd like a point of order. I have some questions I want to ask before I get to talk.
If they're short.
All right. I mean, this is supposed to be a Q&A. One, I was reading the report today, and it sees that you need to take 25 feet of width to put in the trail. That's how I read it. I'm in a butter at milepost 20.5.
I don't believe there's anything in the report that talks about taking property.
All right, because it said it needed 25 feet, and if it needed a siding, it was going to go to 35 feet. Plus, correct me if I'm wrong, is there positive train control in the Downeaster? Patricia Quinn said there wasn't any needed in 2018. Is there now, and is there any planned?
It is not now. It is being installed probably starting next year.
All right, so I noticed in the report it was covered at $4 million a mile for positive train control. And I have a document here from a number of professors. They analyzed 54,000 miles, almost 18,000 locomotives, 70,000 waysides, and the cost per mile for positive train control was $225,000. That's in 2018 dollars. So I was kind of curious how it got elevated up to $4 million. So it accounts for half the price of running commuter rail between Portland and Auburn.
We'll clarify that on the website, Carl. I don't have that because I
Okay.
don't have it in front of me. And
I don't want to
positive
be
train
sarcastic
control
with this last
varies.
question, but the main turnpike was supposed to be free 40 years ago when the bond was paid off. People up in Lewiston, Auburn, New Gloucester, still paying tolls. I-295, there aren't any tolls on it. When is the main turnpike going to become free like it was supposed to 40 years ago? I just see this taking up these rails, gone, are never going to be returned, period. Sure. That on the economic analysis, it says there's going to be $11,000 increase, for the trail. I have a bunch of neighbors on Penny Road. I've lived in this place in the same building, kind of unique, since 1962, except for a 10-year hiatus out in the Midwest. And in that time of eastern New Gloucester, the housing has increased by 610%. New Gloucester has only 450 people fewer by the latest census than Yarmouth does. And I'm hearing that, well, bikers can go 12 miles in Europe and maybe our Americans can't go that far. Well, Yarmouth is 11 miles. You know how far it is? I'm a mile, as I said, milepost 20.5. So basically, these trails aren't really going to help out for any commuters beyond Yarmouth. This is a pretty typical trend. Downtown Portland, I checked Redfin values last month. November, I assume they're October. Median values, downtown Portland, $1 million a house. $570,000 for Portland as an entirety, $700,000 in Falmouth. Yarmouth, $630,000. New Gloucester, $390,000. Downtown Auburn, $200,000. And then they tore out Little Italy to make that giant green space for Franklin Arterial to drive out the poor people. So my neighbors on Penny Road, total assessment, recently reevaluated, $100,000 for per lot. So what is going to be the economic increase if a train station is placed in at the intersection of Route 231 and Penny Road, a logical place to serve Pineland? I bet it'll go up well over 100,000. 234 homes alone in 2.5 miles on Penny Road, that's a $23 million valuation increase. Those should be included in the economic analysis.
Hi, I'm Edward Benjamin, Portland resident. I own .20. Used to be the old St. Lawrence Railroad concrete plant. I have 800 feet of railroad siding off the main track to accept a railroad station. I have 14 acres of land, most of it's marsh, but it will accept a parking garage. We've looked into electric trains, and it's the best alternative to Lewiston. Trails, I agree with trails, but they have to be alongside the railroad train. This is our future. Take the rails up, you dissolve our future. This is all I got to say. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Deb Dawson. I live in Cape Elizabeth, and I support trails and rails, or rails to trails. The most practical configuration is always the way to go. But I can only speak from some personal experience that I frequently use the Eastern Trail, which runs through South Portland, mostly for recreation, but also for some commuting. And another personal experience is my husband that was hit by a car twice while commuting to Portland. So that sticks in my mind as just a really important need to keep commuting cyclists separate from traffic. And so that's my other reason for supporting the trail. And also it improves the quality of life for the communities that the trail runs through. I see this in Portland, South Portland, even Cape Elizabeth with a bike trail. So all of these things, to my mind, support having a trail running through these communities. And if we can also keep the rail service, that's all the better. If it doesn't work along the St. Lawrence line, do the train along the existing freight line. So that's my comment. Thank you very much for your time.
My name's Linda Greely. I live in Portland. I am a very active cyclist, and I've ridden year-round for 15 years commuting. And I can offer that there's probably a lot of car and truck drivers that are not here that probably support getting cyclists off the road, however that happens. I'd also just like to comment, there's a lot of reiteration here, but the duplicate lines doesn't seem like there's the demand, whether it's for passenger or freight. So having those duplicate lines just doesn't seem to make sense. I'd say if there's money being put into the rail, the passenger rail, maybe we can try to boost up the one that's there, because anytime I see an Amtrak going by, it's largely empty, and I would love to support the train, but maybe we'll support the train that we have rather than providing a competition for it. And providing everything that it's, that's needed, whether it's the stops and things like that, and parking. So as far as the commuting, I think going back to a person a couple of minutes ago, where you live and where you work is anywhere along the line. So I think that the trail does offer commuting friendliness for any cyclist, and it's not that everybody's trying to go to Portland. There are people that anywhere along the line that might be commuting, and I do ride more than 12 miles, so that 26.5 would be a phenomenal way to stay off the road. So thank you all for doing this, and I vote for a trail.
Hi, Bonnie Esposito. I'm a resident of Falmouth. And I just want to briefly say, first, thank you for taking public comment on this, and thank you for considering all the possibilities that are out there. I'm a firm supporter of trail use for this corridor. I think it has a lot of benefits health-wise, as well as economic benefits for the community. I've lived in some other communities where trails have been developed. Boise, Idaho is one example. Lots of opposition when the possibility was first opened up, and that trail, they call it the Boise Greenbelt, has become a real amenity in the community, so much so that adjacent properties have increased in value just because of their adjacency to the trail. So I am a cyclist, I'm a pedestrian, I'm a driver, even occasional train rider, but I'm here in support of the trail options. Thank you very much.
Hello, I'm Marna Miller. Oh, can I? Yes, I'm Marna Miller. I live in Falmouth. I'm an enthusiastic supporter of trail use, especially the trail until rail, or whatever it is. Yeah, trail until rail. I'm also here representing my husband, Chase Boyd, who is also an enthusiastic supporter of trail. He's a daily bike commuter into Portland from our home in Falmouth to his work. I am a frequent bike commuter for errands. I like to bike in Falmouth and in Portland to run errands on my bike. I have a lot of friends who I bike with. Very few of them will bike on these errand or commuter routes with me because they tend to have the more difficult competition with cars. I strongly believe that developing a trail on this space would encourage commuting use. Even with people who are already cycling, I think you'll see a lot more use for commuter. I'm also a very, very active advocate for public transportation. And I'm here to tell you that it's possible to commute to your office in Manhattan, which I've been here for 20 years, but for a great chunk of that, my work was in Manhattan. It's possible to commute from Falmouth to Manhattan without ever once setting foot in a car. I'm including Uber in that. And I'm not walking a great distance. So I am a very active proponent of public transportation. I have tried desperately to use rail. I spent 5 years commuting between Boston and New York, and then, as I said, from Falmouth to New York. And I would love to ride the train. It's more expensive. It's less convenient in terms of schedule. It's slower, actually, even when it's running on time. And so I very reluctantly had to shift over to bus for public transportation. So I'm not sure how viable it is here. Thank you.
Terry, name and town.
Thank you. My name is Terry DeWine. I'm a landscape architect. I live in New Gloucester. My office is in Yarmouth. We had the pleasure several years ago working on the feasibility study for the Eastern Trail. And it's been amazing to watch that come about and see what a tremendous asset has been to the community. I do want to congratulate VHB for their very objective way of looking at this. And I wholeheartedly think that would be a mistake to abandon the rail line because it does represent a tremendous asset to the community. Not necessarily right now. We just don't know what's going to happen in the next 10, 20 years. At the same time, I think that with the rise of electric bicycles, of electric scooters, I think that 12-mile limit that we heard about several times already is probably going to be thrown out. Or I think we're going to be finding people are going to be more and more willing to travel greater distances on these new types of transportation measures. I had the pleasure of going to a pro-walk, pro-bike conference in Victoria, British Columbia several years ago, and had the distinct pleasure of riding on some of the trails that extended like radial arms out from the center of Victoria. One's called the Galloping Goose Trail. And along that trail were an amazing number of new housing developments catered primarily to people who commuted by bicycle. They know they could be in the center of Victoria within a matter of half an hour or so, which certainly compared very favorably to the normal time it takes to drive. A question I have, and I know that in New Gloucester we have not had a lot of discussion on this so far, what are the maintenance responsibilities for individual towns along the way? Is it going to be handled on a town-by-town basis, or would it be handled on a more regional basis? There's an awful lot of other questions that, of course, have come up from this. Is there going to be an opportunity for people to submit questions to get our other comments addressed by the committee?
Yes.
Thank you.
So just to answer a little bit of the question on maintenance, I mean, it's done a variety of ways on kind of existing trails. And again, we haven't proposed a way of doing it here, should that be the decision. But for example, the Kennebec River Rail Trail, it's done, there's like a coalition of the 3 towns that kind of manage and operate that trail and maintain it. Similarly, the Railwood Trail, the Mountain Division is similar. The towns of like Gorham and Wyndham, they do the maintenance, maintain the fences, cut the brush, do things like that. On the Down East Sunrise Trail, which is a interim trail use, is actually primarily maintained by the snowmobile club. That's a motorized trail as well, so like the snowmobile clubs and the ATV clubs and those folks, along with the Department of Conservation has some motorized trail funds, and they help those folks maintain that. So that's how that one is maintained. So we don't have a specific model, but usually it's a coalition.
Nate, how do people ask questions if they wanted to ask additional questions?
Yeah, just go to the website, contact us, and submit your question there. It'll come to me, and I'll see it, and we'll get your answer.
Hello, my name is Laura Cannon, and I live in North Yarmouth. I've lived there for a little over 3 years, and I've lived in Maine for about 23 years. I support the trail. I love the idea of a passenger rail. I think that probably feasibility will sort out that question. I think, a number of people have raised issues about the connectivity in Portland, the space needed, and the way the current rail is laid out, but I would love to see the vision that people have for that on the CSX line. For the trail, if it did not become a trail, if it only became a rail, it would be taking something away. That is an asset now. I am an abutter, and for the record, I have felt like I'm a part of this process. This is the second meeting I've been to, and I've been able to submit comments online. I have cross-country skied on that trail. I take my dog on the trail. I walk on it. It's an asset as it is. It's not great. It's not the greatest hiking, but it really is, I think, shows great promise for connecting neighborhoods and connecting towns, and, offering outdoor opportunities, providing greater safety. I have a dear loved one who uses a wheelchair, and I have taken her on rail to trails in Cape Cod and in Maine, in both a manual and a motorized wheelchair, and I would expect with the ADA that these trails would be wheelchair accessible. Lastly, if this is being videotaped and it will be available online, could you please promote where that can be seen? Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Tom Ancona, and I'm a resident of Falmouth. I would like to speak tonight in support of the trail use for this corridor. We live about a quarter mile from access to this corridor. It's probably about 100 yards through the woods. My family and I have 2 boys who are 3.5 and 7. 7-year-old is biking on his own now, but we don't dare bike into Portland anymore because we'd have to bike on Middle Road, Bucknam Road, and Route 1 to get into Portland. With this being potentially trail use, this would provide us wonderful access into Portland, up to Yarmouth, and potentially connecting to other areas as well. My wife and I actually met in Chicago. Chicago has the 25-mile lakefront trail, which was actually how I commuted to work. And in Chicago, which has worse weather than here, that commute was actually during the winter. It could be during the winter as well. But Chicago also has wonderful public transportation options, but the 3 neighborhoods I was a part of in Chicago, which were about a 5-square-mile area, had more population than the entire city of Portland. And so I think without the density and without the political means in these communities to improve the density, I don't see how we would be supporting rail along this corridor, especially when there's another viable corridor nearby. So I do believe that the best use currently for this corridor is for trail, and it'll be used year-round, and it'll be used by people who want to commute, by people who want it for recreation, and as the previous woman said, for people who need ADA access. I think this will be a wonderful asset for all of our communities and for the region. Thank you.
Okay, I have a couple questions. I don't know if that goes into the town, but my name is Jacqueline Story. I am one of the direct abutters here in Cumberland and have been for 27 years. Yes, that's how old I am. So I previously, before me, was my grandparents and great-grandparents were abutters, and one of the main purposes of the land that my family has used for 4 generations now is for hunting. So I was just curious what the implications of both the rail and the hunting and the trails would be on the hunting community and those abutting properties.
So currently, by law, if you follow the rail statutes, unless you have permission to be out there, any type,
Right.
we've heard about dog walking,
Right,
hunting,
yep.
whatever it might be, you're not technically supposed to be out there. Obviously, the wardens have better things to do than chase people off in active lines, so it's not
Correct.
enforced. So typically, I believe, and we'll double check this, like our bike ped trails do not allow hunting. Department of Conservation actually does on their
On
their
the
managed
railway,
trail.
but you can on the abutting properties beside
Oh,
it.
abutting, yes. You can
So
do,
how,
you can
with,
do
if
whatever you
there was
want
a
on your own
trail or
property.
the rail became active, how would that be, was there gonna be certain setbacks? Because now this is a public walking property, like it would for a park.
No. No. It would be. the
State law
own-
says it's 300 feet
for,
from a park, the setback. I just looked it up on my phone before coming up here.
For rail?
For like a parkway, for
Oh,
a
for
park?
parkway. This is a rail
So-
corridor.
So is it different?
Yes.
Because it's public land? I
Yes.
just want it, like, that's
There,
one big
there are
thing.
no setbacks beyond the right-of-way.
Okay, so
which
we
is
could hunt
typically
right up
99
until
feet in
if
this
it was a
corridor.
trail, you could hunt right up until the trail. You just couldn't be on the trail.
Right. Yes.
Okay. And then the other question that I had was, well, first of all, thank you guys for being here. If I'm not mistaken, there were 16 people on the committee that are making this decision?
15.
15? Can we introduce everyone, just so that we can put a name to the face?
At the end, we can, when
Yeah.
everybody's done speaking.
Okay, awesome, thank you.
I'm gonna start with my head.
Not too many. People behind you.
Yeah. Okay. Hi there. My name is Topher Castañeda. I'm a resident of Portland, and I'm a frequent commuter up to Auburn. I've been doing that for the past year. I have many of friends who live in Portland who are also frequent commuters to the LA area as well. All of us being under the age of 30. And I'm kind of curious as to how many of these meetings you've had, where they've been held, and do you plan to have more of these meetings in the LA area? One of the bigger issues with LA residents is the lack of access to cars, and just getting here can be an ordeal, as we've heard from other people who have had to speak for others. So I'm a little curious about that.
So this is the only scheduled public meeting. The Rail Use Corridor Council has met, I think, monthly for the most part.
Okay.
And those meetings have been advertised
Virtual.
on the website and
Okay,
open to
cool.
the public.
Awesome. Okay, I didn't know that. Awesome. And then I'm also curious, just more logistics of what would the rail hours look like? Is this specifically only for commuters? Are you looking for later hours for people who are going out on the weekends? Like, is this to economically benefit residents of Portland and Lewiston in growing those sectors, or I'm just a little curious about.
Yeah, so a lot of that would be detailed once you got to developing a service, things like schedule and how many hours a day and how many, all those types of things would be as you got further into it. So we
Okay,
wouldn't
and so
have that type of information now.
As it stands right now, too, you don't have any idea of what fares would look like, would you?
No.
Damn it. Okay. Well, there goes all my questions. I guess one more question, if you can't answer. I know someone tried touching on it earlier, but it was like a little iffy. When has the CSX line been used as a commuter line from Auburn to Portland?
It has not. It currently hosts the Downeaster between Brunswick and the state line going to Boston, state line, New Hampshire, Massachusetts.
And just to be sure, like you said earlier, the state would have to negotiate with the private line in order to talk about commuters, and that can be a whole hassle as far as just working out those times, correct?
It could be, yes.
Okay, perfect. Just want to know that. Thank you so much.
Hi, folks. Thanks for doing this. My name is Miles Smith. I'm a resident of Portland. I grew up in Cumberland, right down the street here. I think one of my middle school teachers might have been here. Sorry for everything. My dad still lives across the street on Main Street, and I moved back to Portland because I wanted to be someplace where I could walk and bike everywhere. We have a family of 4 with 1 car. Can you believe that? A family of 4 with 1 car, and it's possible, kind of, in Portland, but still very dangerous for my kids to get to school, for us to come visit my dad, my grandfather, or their grandfather down the street here. I will not take them on Route 9. It would be crazy. We have a cargo bike, e-bike, 12 miles in an e-bike. It's not a big deal. My mother lives in Yarmouth. Also very possible. I've done it myself, but it's not safe with the kids. So I would very much encourage the trail. Particularly I was convinced by the arguments for keeping the rails as an asset, though I'm perfectly willing to get rid of those if a solution to allow for passenger service were also on the table. I also use commuter service. We can walk to the station in Portland and take it to Boston. We've walked to the station in Portland and taken it to Old Orchard Beach with the kids and then taken the train back. It's great. If you could do that from Cumberland or Yarmouth or Auburn, that would be fantastic too. I did have one question, which was the person from DOT, I think the gentleman in the middle. At the beginning, you mentioned that DOT does not maintain trails, like it's not in your charter or funding. Could you explain that? Sorry.
Right. I was just saying, so in situations like the Kennebec River Rail Trail, the Downey Sunrise Trail, we're responsible for the underlying rail, the culverts, the rail, but, if there's a trail surface, the trail, we do not maintain those. So we would, like the Kennebec River Rail Trail, we enter into agreement with a number of municipalities, and they're responsible for the maintenance. There are always, storm incidents where the question is, well, is it whose responsibility? So we do, especially with the Kennebec River Rail Trail, if there's a washout or something like that, our crews will assist the towns with some of those issues. So, but again, we don't maintain the surface of the trail.
Cool. That needs to change. Maine Department of Transportation needs to be responsible for all forms of transportation. And look at all the people here who want to see both rail and walking. I know it's not your job, but there are some elected officials in this room, and there probably are some listening at home, and some of you know who they are, and some of them are my friends or your friends. Call them and tell them we should not have to choose between rails and trails when MDOT is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to build a new highway in Bangor, and Maine Turnpike is spending hundreds of millions of dollars to consider a new turnpike to Gorham. Those are ridiculous wastes of money when we're like fighting over peanuts for rails and trails. That's where our money should be going. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Matt Thurston. I've lived in New Gloucester, well, for 53 years on and off. I am a property owner and a butter. I am a proponent of the existing rail use, and I think it should continue. I think if you do take that away, it will never come back. I concur. I would like some more, that there is not going to be any more land necessary, for the trail system. I think that that's important that you clarify that there is not going to be more land, or if there is going to be more land. And the second question I have is to the gentleman that put together the estimate for the cost of these projects. How intensive was your site survey along this 26.5-mile corridor?
So I'll go back to what I said when I answered Carl's question. There is no anticipated land taking from it, whether it be for rail with trail, or again, it's a 99-foot corridor.
Yep.
That's.
Okay, that's enough, okay, please. People have been waiting all night to make their comments. We understand what you're saying, Carl. We'll get back, and it'll be posted online. It'll be posted online. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Carl.
I'd be happy to answer Carl's question at the end, if we'll let folks wait. So, and then the second part, Phil, the estimate. As far as that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean exactly by
Well, I'm just
intensive.
saying that
It's
it's
a very high-level estimate. We didn't look at individual properties and determine
Yeah,
on this particular parcel, we need X amount of retaining wall for a railway trail is just more
Just more of a
high-level
Google
estimates.
Earth
Just
study
that
and
was
kind
the
of look
scope.
at it that way and
Yep.
go with it from there?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'd be careful with that.
Yep.
That's a tricky way to do something when you really, I owned a lot of restaurants, and, you know, I usually have a more detailed estimate of cost before I go into a project of this magnitude.
And certainly it would be if
I
this
will
moves
say I'll
forward.
appreciate it if you, Carl's my neighbor just down the street a bit, so I'd appreciate you to answer that question, and that would be great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
So Nate, are you going to answer that question?
Well, I'd let people talk, and I'll be happy, I'll talk
Okay,
to
at the
Carl
end?
half the night if he
Okay.
wants to. Yep.
Okay. Good evening. My name's Nancy Grant. I'm a Portland resident, but I've also lived in North Yarmouth and Cumberland. I've been a bicycle pedestrian advocate for almost 25 years. In fact, my introduction to the world of bike ped infrastructure was right down the road in North Yarmouth. Tonight, I want to speak specifically about safety and how important it is to have a separate and protected place to ride and walk. Over the years, I can't tell you how many people I have encountered who tell me that they love their bike but are simply too afraid to ride on the roads. They are afraid of the motor vehicles that drive over the speed limit, that drive way too close to them, that don't want to slow down as they pass, and that are multitasking in every conceivable way as they, quote, share the road. For every person that does choose to bicycle on our roads, there are hundreds who simply won't take the risk. Last week, I reconnected with an old cycling friend, a young woman from South Portland who shared that before she had her baby, she assumed that she would include her son in her biking lifestyle. Like so many of her generation, she believes in the health, environmental, and other benefits of biking. She said his daycare is near Wainwright Field in South Portland, and having the Eastern Trail, a rail trail, so she could avoid biking on Highland Avenue was a lifesaver. Now that he's in school, she picks him up from aftercare in Cape Elizabeth and rides him home on Route 77. She says, almost every day, I wonder if I am taking on too much risk to bike with my child. The beauty of a rail trail is that it's completely separated and protected from the motorists. People of all ages, abilities, genders, and socioeconomic status can ride on a rail trail and feel and be safe. I hope you advisory council people will support the trail until rail. Thank you.
I want to thank Bill and Town of Cumberland for hosting this meeting, as well as you folks up there as well. My name is David Brink, and I am a resident of Cumberland here. And questions that I have is I really support the connectivity between Lewis and Auburn and Portland with rail, okay? We have, on the map up there and the map that Tina showed, you had a railway that's not being used right now. You have the CSX railway, which worked wonderful, okay? Can that be used as a commuter rail? Because what you have on that rail coming in there, it comes down into Portland where all the transportation needs are there, cabs, commuter rails to Boston, buses, et cetera, okay? That's already in place, okay? And the cost of rebuilding this one to make it accessible for rail, well, we all saw the numbers up there, okay? I'm not opposed to keeping that railway going, but boy, using this as a multi-use pass for bikes, et cetera, just like what they did down in Scarborough, where they had a parallel rail line running. Now it's a multi-use rail used by pedestrians, baby joggers. You know, I even see an occasional hunter out there in the marshes. Everybody likes these trails. And the abutters, there's plenty of abutters on those, and everybody seems to get along. So I'm a proponent for the trail use, and as long as we can maybe do some more research on getting that CSX line used as a commuter rail from Auburn to Portland. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Hey, Bill. Good evening, Toby Bell from Cumberland. I was able to walk here today, or tonight, so there we go. I think enough people have talked about the CSX. That seems to me to be kind of like, number one, we got to figure out whether or not that can be used in some capacity for passenger service. If I'm mistaken, let me know, but it seems like that's kind of like the obvious one. We've got to get out of the way first. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Totally different topic here, a couple of chuckles. All right, Bill. Snowmobiles. So I noticed in the economic analysis that it was assumed that snowmobiles would be allowed on the trails. Just a couple of concerns there. Initially it was, do we allow motorized vehicles on this thing or not? And then the economic analysis assumed that there would be. I'm sure it's a big component of that. My concern with snowmobiles, I'm a speed freak. I don't own one, but I love them. Those things go really fast, and there's nothing you like to see better than a long straightaway with plenty of visibility and predictable snow conditions. So if we get to the point where we're going to be considering a trail, if we get to a point where we're talking about motorized vehicles, we ought to be discussing the width of the trail, because I think a good standard would be whatever the ITS system has up in Aroostook County. Seems to work for people going 90 miles an hour both ways. It's pretty unbelievable. So now a question, how much of these funds is covered by federal versus state? Just talking money here. Is there a rough percentage, or does it depend on the option?
So it depends on specific categories of funds, and to say they're available. A lot of these now are competitive, so you have to apply and be competitive for those funds, whether it be for rail or trail. They come through these discretionary programs, so where you submit an application, and based on that application and other things, they're rated and funds are awarded. There are some set-asides of regular funds, but it's not enough so that, say, we could go build a $19 million trail tomorrow, or a $31 million or $200 million or whatever it is, railroad tomorrow either. Those just don't exist. Those aren't coming to the state now and we go, oh, we'll just pluck these. Those would be discretionary grant applications pursuing those types of money, or several discretionary grant applications.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like, eventually we'll end up talking about the practical realities, the economics of this thing, and to the extent that we can cover it by federal. Clearly, that's helpful. I guess my last one is a comment. If we end up going trail, all I know when I drive through Portland, and I lived in Portland for a number of years, and we use the Back Bay, the Baxter Boulevard around the Back Bay quite a lot. And those people are walking in circles. So can imagine what could possibly happen here. So thank you very much. Have a great time.
Ken Capron from Portland. Let's hear it for Bill Shane, the most marvelous MC we could find tonight. Good job, Bill. I'm not sure how much I can add to this. I'm a CPA by trade, so when I look at a project like this, I look at economics. But having grown up with a lot of land in Scarborough and having loved trains all my life, I can't separate the two. I love trails and I love rails. So I guess what I'm saying is, why not do both and get the best of both worlds? We can be greedy at this point in time, if you know what I mean. There is federal money out there floating around. We just lost out on a CRISI grant, if I'm not mistaken, and the RAISE grants are open again. So I'm just wondering if there isn't money enough to do both and do them well and do them right, do it once, and quit all the quibbling over who's going to do what to whom. I really think both of these are important assets to the future of Maine. We don't know today what's going to be like in 25 years or 30 years. Certainly 25 years ago, everyone was supporting buying out the rail. That's why the state owns it. So I'd like to, I certainly don't want to set a precedence of pulling up rail and making it into just trail. I think economically it's a little bit expensive for taxpayers. I think they'll probably, pay 20 or 25% as the match, roughly. But, for a legacy like this, it's a good opportunity. I hate to see us lose it. And so thank you.
Hi, my name is Pam Barnacle. I've been a resident of North Yarmouth for 28 years. I am in a butter with my husband, so our property, we have hundreds of feet right there on the railroad. I came here tonight definitely strongly supporting trails, but after listening to everybody, I can see it's complex. So I'm going to give you that, and I thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm a nurse, and I consider what I do really hard. I could never do what you're doing, so thank you for that. I do strongly support the trails. I do, for all the obvious reasons. Everybody in here said some really awesome things about the safety, the economics, the outdoors. There's a lot of great things. I would much prefer on my property, abutting my property, that seeing all the people, being outside, that all sounds fabulous. There is a part of me that is probably saying we shouldn't pull up the rails, for the future, just in case. But again, I've not studied this the way you've studied it, but I am a supporter of the trails. Thank you very much.
All right. Hi, my name is Doug Leland. I live in Freeport, formerly lived in Cumberland. And I'm an advocate for the trail. And you've heard a lot of the reasons why this evening, so I won't repeat all those. But I will make just a couple of observations. The discussion tonight's been about 26 miles of a rail trail, and that's your charge. But it's more than that. It connects to the Eastern Trail, which connects to New Hampshire. And when a trail goes over 70 miles, it goes beyond a local town asset to a regional attraction. And when you add in the Casco Bay Trail that's been envisioned, you're now over 150 miles. And that becomes a multi-state attraction. And the economic benefits of these trails have been demonstrated in many, many states that have embraced multiple use paths as part of their transportation infrastructure. So it isn't just the 26 miles, it's the whole vision for the state. 3 times in the last 5 years, I've traveled to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, so that I could get in a multi-day ride on a off-road trail and not have to worry about cars coming up my back. People in Maine should not have to travel to western Pennsylvania for a bike ride. And if you ride around Freeport, Maine, you will not see any families out on the road because there is not a safe place to ride. And I think it's probably true in a lot of other towns as well. The transportation infrastructure needs to include places for people who want to ride a bike with their families, commute to work. Right now, it doesn't exist. You have a great opportunity in front of you to begin filling out a vision that is being shared by a lot of people in the state right now. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Mike Layton. I'm a resident here in Cumberland. I had no intentions of speaking tonight, but I'm here to speak in favor of a public trail option for recreational use. Every year, as we've heard, hundreds of thousands of pedestrians and cyclists are both hit and killed by vehicles every year on public roadways. Pedestrian traffic fatalities tripled in the first part of 2021 from the same period in 2020 just here in Maine. A lot of those accidents happening in Maine, or in Portland. Excuse me. Distracted driving is getting worse, and as an avid runner and father of 2 young girls myself, options are often very limited to run and ride safely as we don't have sidewalks along every roadway. I'm also a volunteer firefighter and EMT here in town. I have personally responded to car versus pedestrian calls of all severity, and a public trail is just another opportunity to reduce the exposure for pedestrians looking to be active in and around their community. I am passed daily by cars drifting into bike lanes, speeding, going left of center, and as we've heard, shoulders are often very small or non-existent, which I can very much confirm. This trail serves as a major hub for active transportation for many Mainers, as highlighted this evening, especially as the state seeks to attract young professionals. I think this trail provides an opportunity for those of all ages to be active and to do so safely. Thank you.
It's as tall as it'll go, Dale,
That's
sorry.
all right. Hi, my name's Dale Story. I'm a direct abutter
Couple of questions on when you did the rail and trail option and figuring your estimates, did you include another bridge over the Presumpscot River for the trail? There's obviously a train there. You did. So that's like another $20 million over the Presumpscot River. But, okay, just wanted to check that. And then two, a question, have you consulted with anybody at MDOT along the 295 corridor from Portland to Freeport? As you know, I'm a direct abutter, and that road could obviously use 3 lanes right now, especially in the summertime. That's a pretty narrow corridor between 295 and the railroad tracks currently. So if there's any plans for future expansion for 295 to make that 3 lanes, probably wouldn't work. So I didn't know if there was any talk between departments as far as expanding the 295 to 3 lanes there.
So we do talk to each other, but there are no plans currently to widen 295.
So I think that's an issue. We've heard multiple people say that riding 295 is going to be is dangerous. Primarily in the summertime is when it's at its worst, and that's not going to be people using the corridor, the trail system. It's people from out of state coming to visit Booth Bay, Rockland, and down east. They're not using the corridor. They're using the 295 to get up and down they're not biking or hiking. They may use it when they're here, but ought to talk with them directly. Thank you.
Thanks. Name's Peter Hall. I live in Falmouth, and I'm here to express my support for the trail option, the Casco Bay Trail option. The economic impacts that have been discussed, I think, are important studies. I'm appreciative that they're done. But I think there's an aspect that perhaps wasn't touched upon as much as it could be, and that's the concept of quality of life. It seems like a nebulous concept, but economists, health professionals, sociologists, psychologists, all have come to the rather unstartling conclusion to me that when you have trail systems in, park systems in, people are healthier and happier. And, you know, in terms of use, I don't think we really know how good a use this is going to have, but when you look at studies all across the United States, rural areas in Montana, somebody mentioned Boise, Bloomington, Indiana, over 50% of the community uses these trails to walk their babies, to ride their bikes, to take walks. I think that if you take a look at places like New York City, where I was 2 weeks ago, they tore down the West Side Highway. They put up a big walking bike path that goes all along the Hudson River. Hundreds of people have used that. Follow-up studies have shown that of all the public projects in New York City, that's the single most appreciated for improving people's quality of life. So there's a lot of benefits, but quality of life is why I live in Maine. I want access to outdoors, and I think this gives people, particularly who don't feel safe on our roads, the chance to do that. Thank you.
Okay, name and town.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the council. My name is Paul Drynan. I live in Westbrook, and I'm here tonight to offer comments in support of the Casco Bay Trail. I'd like to touch down on a topic I've heard throughout the council process, and again here tonight. It's a common theme. If the tracks come out, they'll never come back. This is a common sentiment used by people who either aren't familiar with rail banking, or in some cases, it's a scare tactic employed by the most ardent rail supporters, and it's patently false. Most rail corridors are federally protected by a process known as rail banking. Rail banking protects a corridor in perpetuity. If the tracks come out and a trail is built in this corridor, the tracks may be reinstated if it's deemed necessary. Put this in perspective, there's about 22,000 some odd miles of rail trail in America. Approximately 6 have been reinstated back to track. Now, why 6 miles? because the overall value of a trail is typically a better investment and has a greater community impact. Why did those 6 miles get reinstated? Because it was deemed necessary and therefore made sense. This shows us two things. One, the tracks will and they can go back when and if it makes sense. And two, and perhaps most importantly, rail banking works as intended. Now, why should this corridor become a trail? Because nothing is cleaner, nothing is safer, more affordable, more accessible, more equitable than a car-free trail for walking and biking. And since I have a few seconds left, I'm going to shout out a number, 153. That's how many people were killed in the state of Maine being hit by a car last year. We can get that number to 0 by building what's called a separated facility. That's what this trail could be, car-free trail for walking and biking. It's called Vision Zero. It's a new policy started in Europe. It's here in America, and it's going to be funded by the government. Please Google Vision Zero. Thank you.
Go. I have John Backman, South Portland. I have a question about freight or metric tons that come into the state of Maine. The railroad system, CSX, has a certain capacity that they can carry. How much does the state of Maine, can they increase, and does that hold their rail line to ship that tonnage to different spots?
So you mean
Particularly from Auburn to Portland or elsewhere.
So you mean an overall tonnage?
That's correct.
There's no limit.
There's no limit. Okay. All right.
Or government imposed limit, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, but our freight system, Maine, is kind of the end of the line, so we have a limited
The
capacity.
beginning, we're the beginning of the line.
All right.
So we always remind developers.
Maine needs a better advertising then for our freight divisions. Yes. All right. That's it. That's what I want to know.
Ed Suslovic, resident of Portland. I'm also a longtime member of the Metro Board, which operates the Breeze, among many other lines, between Portland and Brunswick. I'm a longtime member of the NEPRA's Downeaster Station Committee meeting. I also realized that I chaired the Master Planning Committee for the Portland Jetport, and I'm currently a board member for the Casco Bay Trail Alliance. So I've done planes, trains, buses, and trails. I'm Mr. Multimodal. I'm here tonight, along with the vast majority of the people you've heard, to urge your support of the trail until rail option. In addition to tonight, the overwhelming majority supporting that, over 90% of your online comments on your website are in favor of the trail until rail as well. So clearly the voters, the people, the residents of all ages, all abilities are speaking and have spoken. Just to address a couple of quick points, you've heard the benefits of the trail. Those that say we want to do rail and trail, we can do that. We have the CSX main line. And for people that say, well, you know, it's too busy, we just heard there's only about 6 freight trains a day. If you add 5 round trips, which is currently what the Downeaster runs between Brunswick, Portland, and Boston, you add another 10, that's 16 trains per day. That's less than 1 per hour. I don't think that's exactly congested rail traffic. And I'm sure we already work with CSX on the Downeaster line, and you'd have to work with CSX anyway because this line only gets you to not even to Danville Junction. It doesn't get you to Auburn or Lewiston. Only the CSX line gets you into downtown Auburn and Lewiston. So you have to work with them anyway. Same thing on the southern end. So I would just urge you to vote for the trail until rail, and at the same time work with NEPRA to get the Downeaster service extended to Lewiston Auburn on the existing CSX main line. And frankly, if there was so much demand for rail, why isn't NEPRA here urging rail? My last comment would be for a fraction of the cost that passenger rail would cost, we could pay people's bus tickets on the Concord coach and they could have free bus service between Lewiston, Auburn, and Portland. Thank you.
George Rowe. I live in Portland. I just want to remind everyone just how much bigger this is than just a couple suburban communities wanting an exclusive recreational amenity. The history behind this line, as some people know, I mean, this is the rail line to Montreal that basically created Portland's sort of city status. This was the line that, until even the late 60s, French Canadians from Quebec were coming down and connecting by bus in the Old Port to Old Orchard Beach. That's why French Canadians come to Old Orchard Beach, is they originally were coming by train through here on this rail line. And there's so much history here. And we need to think big if we're going to do this right. It's not about getting just to Lewiston. It's about reconnecting an entire rail network that is really the only efficient way, if we're going to save the planet, to do this. And that's why I think it's way beyond MDOT, or the Maine Department of Cars, which is basically what your mandate has been basically for the last 100 years, needs to be bigger. And unfortunately, you probably don't have the mandate for this particular little small-scale study to think that way. But that's what you need to be thinking, because adding a lane to 295, if it should even be possible, is going to require probably $1 billion or more. It's going to way outspend anything that we're contemplating here. But that's why we need both the CSX line and this line, because 50 years from now, when most of us in this room are gone, we will need transportation alternatives that do not involve getting into your individually owned automobile and zipping around southern Maine. Thank you.
My name is Ron Graham. I live in North Yarmouth, longtime resident. The road that we live on abuts and crosses this corridor. I'd like to make a couple of observations. During the COVID time, year and a half roughly, because we were inside, I would walk the trail both north and south most days. And I can tell you that most days I walked, I would see other people walking, neighbors sometimes, but people from quite a distance away. It has been more than 10 years since I've seen a real train on this corridor track. The last train that I can remember that was of any significance was that silver bullet train that was mentioned earlier. And my memory is that it lasted about a year, and because of lack of interest, it stopped. I am in favor of using the train tracks if there's a demand there, but I haven't seen the demand. So in that case, I would support the trails until rails, so that we can use it as trails, and then if there is a need in the future, we could always put the tracks back or maintain them properly so that you could use them. I would also like to speak for my wife, State Representative Annie Graham, who represents North Yarmouth and Gray. She also supports the use of the corridor as trails. And I would like to thank the committee for your detailed reports. And I'd like to thank all of the people here that are Boston Celtics or Boston Bruins fans, because you had to miss the game that's going on right now. Thank you.
My name is Emily Cartwright, and I live in Cumberland. I'd like to express my support for the use of this corridor as a trail. I support it for all the recreation and commuting purposes already stated, but also for youth sports. I coach cross-country skiing year-round with local youth athletes. You may have seen us on the roads on our roller skis. We try to ski on dead-end neighborhoods, but we know it's not fully safe to be training on the roads. Both ourselves and the cars who come across us would love for skiers to be off the roads altogether. So this trail would also be used by the youth student athletes in our areas. It would be an excellent improvement to our safety. Thank you.
we're going to wrap up right now. If anybody has additional comments, we'll take them here or online. Committee members that are still remaining will be here for a few more minutes if you have questions down below. So thank you all for attending and appreciate your support. Technology is, yeah, well,
Can I see that, Phil?